Well, good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful, well, it's sort of beautiful. It's not the most beautiful day, but it's beautiful because we're here. Ken Salvail and Don Burnett here to help you with your gardening issues. And it is the AM 1150 Garden Show. We're here every week at this time and enjoy every darn minute of it. Got lots going on today, but I think the first thing we got to do is our tips and plants of the week.
This is true.
Well, my tip of the week is, if you have any garlic showing some growth, like I have. I got 3 inches of growth on my garlic, Ken.
Oh, there you go.
Like I have. Best cover it up with some Nature's Gold or mulch or something similar to protect it, because that's pretty vulnerable. We get some weather coming up. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but we have some weather coming up, folks. So my tip of the week is that, and my plant of the week is elfin thyme, Thymus serpylum elfin.
Yeah.
And it is one of the best creeping thymes. I used to recommend woolly thyme all the time, and now I'm recommending elfin thyme. It's
super nice little plant.
Yeah.
You bet. I also have a tip on a plant this week, and my tip of the week is that, as Don was saying, cold weather starts tonight, so you want to keep your mind in your garden, and just think about plants that are possibly needing some protection, and just basically do the walk around today and see what's going on. We're going to get some cold weather within the next few days. We want to get on that and be careful. Even just put a bucket over things. That's helpful for sure. Remember this also, that roots breathe oxygen, so don't bury the roots of your trees when you're doing any renovations in your yard. That's critically important. And my plant of the week this week is the Hellebors. And the Hellebor group is one of my favorites. There's a new series that's just coming out this year called North Star. So the North Star series is super nice. What a beautiful collection of lovely Hellebors, and I want to keep my eyes peeled for that this year. Sometimes these new introductions, they start this year and they may not get into full flight till next year, but you never know. If you can find one, I think they'd be good to get on to. That's my tips and plans for this week. Remember to check growercoach.com.
And darn it, Ken, I should have taken a picture of my hellebore right down by the base of my greenhouse there, and that beautiful big leafed one. It has buds. It's got about 15 fat buds coming at the base.
Yeah, you got to put something over that for sure.
Thank you for reminding me.
Yes, I was out looking at mine, and it's funny. I've got one that's in a cooler, really shady, deeply shady spot, and it's still kind of not doing much yet. But I've got 2 other fairly big ones that are out in sort of a protected, sunnier spot, and they've got the same thing. You can see the buds, and you can almost see the color of the petals, you know. And so, anyway, I've got some big, the big containers. I'm gonna, I'm just gonna flip them over top of those things and give them some protection. But I got to put a couple bats of insulation in there just to give them a little bit of extra protection. I'm hoping to get the insulation on while the earth is still warm, because it's it's fairly warm right now. But put the insulation on, keep that area unthawed a bit, and then put the cover on a big pot. Or I've got just some of those tote bins that I'm not using, so I'm going to use those.
Well, I have a question, and I should know this, and I think I do. But I've got some really big foliage on there right now. It's about a 1.5 feet high and big, heavy, good-looking leaves. Then I got all this stuff coming up at the base.
Yeah.
Can I cut that foliage off?
You can, but I'm inclined to just leave it for now, because there's food storage within those stems and in those leaves as well. So, I would just put that cover on and ignore them. So even if they get squished down or broken, there's still that connection. And then protect them through the winter, and then first thing in the spring, when we know it's spring, then go in and cut off all the old leaves from last year.
Yeah, I mean, they're strong and healthy, these leaves. I'll send you a picture.
Yeah, I saw them not long ago. They were beautiful and big. That
was one that I got from Brian. I can't remember. I've got the tag somewhere, so I know the name of it. But got it a couple of years ago from Brian, and it's a beauty.
Yeah,
lovely
I love those,
color.
Those vigorous ones are really nice.
Very
They're
dark,
easier to work.
Dark color.
Yeah. The flowers dark, or the
flowers?
Both, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, well, here we go. 250-862-2525 to get through to us today. And we've got a guest coming on later on. Dan Bruce is going to call in, of course, regarding our mutual friend, Alistair Betty. He's a horticulturist extraordinaire. He's now passed away, but He was a great friend of ours, and one of his best friends was Bob Kingsmill, the potter, Bob Kingsmill.
Oh, right.
So Bob's going to be talking to us today about his friendship with Alistair, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
and
very
so
cool.
it's interesting because all of us, Dan Bruce and Ken Salvail, Don Burnett, Bob Kingsmill, we all knew this gentleman, and he put an impact on us. He was an amazing man.
I was so lucky to help him move his plant collection, and that was just fabulous. And then he couldn't move. When you do that, when you downsize and move out of your main garden area, there's no point in leaving some of those special things behind because nobody's really going to know that they're there or what they are. And so, it was an honor really to be able to take his plants and save all of his favorites, you know. And then when he got moved into his new place, and we went back and planted those up for him and got him going. And it was pretty cool.
Case in point, Ken. We last spring we had the honor of getting our friend Helen's plants when she moved into Wedgwood, and we got a huge number of her plants, and so this spring is going to be fun to watch them emerge and see what we've got coming up.
That is really cool.
I want to wish happy birthday to a very special person today. My dear Aunt Kay. Kay McLeod is my mom's younger sister. Came to Kelowna with her family in the 1930s, and they arrived on the Sycamoose, the paddle wheeler. My mom used to talk about their trip up the lake on the Sycamoose and seeing Kelowna show up. And it
must have been exciting.
Pretty exciting. Lee and Helen Henderson, that's Grandma and Grandpa, moved here with their family, which included Harold Henderson, Evelyn Henderson, my mom, and Kathleen, their youngest. The eldest son, Lee Jr., remained in Calgary. He got a job there, so he didn't come to Kelowna. Moved to Kelowna. He was pretty much set up in Calgary. And as a dental equipment salesman, there was a lot of dentistry in that family. Harold was a dentist. My grandfather was a dental mechanic, made false teeth. Mm-hmm. And, of course, Lee Jr. Was a salesman of dental equipment. And, of course, grandson, my cousin Bruce, became a dentist, a very well-known dentist in Kelowna, now since retired, but a very, very great dental family. And Auntie Kay taught school here in Kelowna for many years, and took some time off to raise her family, and then went back and taught again later in life. And so there's probably a number of listeners out there that may have had her as their teacher, Mrs. McLeod, and maybe even earlier it was Miss Henderson. My mom was a teacher as well, Miss Henderson, they called her. Anyway, there you go, Kay McLeod. And guess what? She is 99 years old, coming up on Tuesday.
Fabulous.
Happy birthday,
wow,
Auntie
happy birthday. Amazing. That's great.
She's a giant. She really is, Auntie Kay. 99 years young, coming up on Tuesday.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, Ken, we came almost so close to having the same tips this week. I mean, you could almost meld them together. I said cover my garlic. I would cover your garlic.
Yeah.
Because I got it sticking up. You said cover everything.
Yeah, just be careful.
It wasn't quite the same.
I wish you could cover the cherry trees and the apricots because I have a feeling they're going to get zapped,
Yeah,
and
we're going to have another one of those darn winters
yeah.
where the peach trees may not produce. I mean, some of them, well, the cherries were sporadic, and so were the peach trees. I mean, good friends Ted, they had very few, if any, peaches at all last year. And yet there were other orchards that were okay, so it's all a matter of
It seems like, I think overall there was at least a 40% reduction.
40% in peaches?
Last year. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly in peaches, but a lot of those soft fruits, it's just general. I'd say that it's just an average, and some people were worse than that. Well, some only had 40% of the crop, and it's difficult to harvest with only that small amount because you just can't pay the bills, right?
Well, let's just have a peek at what's going on here. Tomorrow night, it's going to be minus 12.
Yep.
Monday night, minus 15.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, minus 17.
Yikes.
And Wednesday, minus 23 and minus 13 in the day.
Ay. That's not good.
Next day, Thursday, February 11th, minus 23 and minus 14 in the day. Friday, February 12th, minus 19 at night, minus 12 in the day. Saturday, minus 12, minus 6. And then Sunday, minus 11, minus 4. And Monday...
Back to normal.
Yeah. Monday the 15th, minus 11, minus 3 of the day. And then Tuesday, minus 6 and minus 1, which is kind of normal. And then minus 4 on Wednesday the 17th and 2 above. So 2 above in the daytime.
Yeah, I just, I always hope that they're forecasting the worst. And then as it approaches, it's not as bad as what they say.
Yeah. This often happens. I mean, this it's fascinating because I've been watching the 14-day forecast very closely because I knew there was some weather coming up. And at one point, I was saying to Donna, I said, wow, it's only minus 10, minus 11. That's all we're showing here. When they start going minus 20 plus, that's when it gets to be a stinker.
Yeah.
Especially after all this warm weather we've been having.
Yeah, and if you want to remember the forecast, of course, do a screenshot with your phone so that when you bring up all the forecasts and then do the screenshot so it saves that. And then you can go back next week and see how accurate they were. Because it's hard for me to remember what they forecasted because it seems to change about every 3 hours. About every 4 hours, I think the forecasts change. Because even from yesterday to today, it's changed. It's got colder. So,
yeah.
You know. Anyway, that's the way it goes. I think that these temperatures are, it would be normal for us to get a couple little blasts, like this over the winter. Yeah. As I've often said, it's not really how cold it gets, but it's how long it gets cold. Yeah. And as you were saying, when you get to the high temperature of the day is minus 14, like it says on Thursday next week, that's pretty harsh, when the high is minus 14. That's pretty rough on the plants, and that means deep frost penetration into the earth. So those plants that are sitting there and all happy little campers, they're going to be in for a little surprise, and unfortunately we're going to lose a bunch of stuff. Hopefully we get some snow. Is there any precipitation in that forecast between, say, today and Monday or Tuesday?
We'll have a look.
It's really the next 3 days that are critical.
We will have a look, but first we've got to, I think we're going to take a short break here, and then we've got Eric waiting for us because we're going to talk to Eric when we come back with more AM 1150 Gardening. Yes, we're back with you. Pretty cloudy out there, Ken. Low-hanging clouds, or I guess you could almost call it fog across the lake.
It's kind of foggy. I think it's drizzling out today, so we got a little bit of rain. Hopefully that turns to an intensive snowfall tomorrow.
Well, this is what we were just talking about during the break. We're hoping for snow, folks, because snow is a good cover for our plants. If you don't get any snow, they're vulnerable. But we're going right to the phone lines, and we're going to talk to Eric. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Don. Ken, how are you doing?
Excellent.
Good, thanks.
Good. Just overheard your temperatures there. They're pretty low.
They're getting down, yeah.
Just got a little thing that we used to do way back in Alberta. Used to get a hot pail of hot water, put it in the pail, and then just throw it in the air. Let it just freeze.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to get that cold.
That cold? No, I thought maybe it might be.
You got to be like minus 30 or 40 for that.
Well, okay, I forgot about that. I thought it was the time when we did it in Alberta.
Well, yeah, and you were so used to those temperatures there.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, if anybody's out there thinking of making an ice skating rink, a hockey rink, now's the time to do it.
Make it fast.
This is the window right coming up. Eric?
That's good. Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that to you.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to do it, that is. But
yeah.
It's worth a try.
Well, get out there.
Slow motion.
Have a look at those plants. You might want to put some hot water. Well, don't put hot water on them, but you might want to put a bucket beside them and keep changing it so that it kind of warms them up.
I got plants inside, not outside.
Oh, there
you go.
Okay, buddy. Thank you for the call. Take care.
Sounds good. You too.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, it's... I guess they used to say your breath would tinkle. If you blow out, your breath would tinkle. I've never seen it
freeze.
That cold. I've never seen it as cold as that, but,
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
It's getting on the chilly side coming up.
Yeah, that is cold, and like you say, I'm hoping it's not as bad as what they say. So,
Right, yeah.
But nothing you can do about it. But for those people who love plants, I would be thinking of protecting anything. If you haven't protected it yet, now is the time. And I'd say we have today and tomorrow, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so I know that's my plan later this afternoon is to get out with some insulation and some tote, those big totes.
Yep. They work well. I got that over my banana.
Yep.
But I think I'll put a little.
You got to turn your heating cable on in your fig tree.
In the fig thing. I got to think of all these things. Walk around, do a walkabout, and just say, okay, heating cable on the fig, cover up my hellebore, do a little more insulation on the banana.
If there's any carrots left out there, you got to get them because they will be mush.
Okay. Dig the carrots.
Anything that you have in the ground will be mush after that, I'm sure. Because we had our carrots one year, and we even protected them, and it went down to about -16 or something. And then when it thawed, the top half of them was mush.
I think I'll dig them.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
they'll stay in your fridge for months.
Lily, the dog, was digging them too, and
you were saying,
but she didn't do a good job because she ate them every time she dug them. She didn't. Yeah,
she loves those carrots.
There's a caller was wondering. Last week I was talking about whitefly in the greenhouse and how it is a tough one to deal with.
Yeah,
and I got some ambush from Buckerfields.
Yeah,
and my goodness, Ken,
works
that
good.
is working
in a greenhouse, but not in your house.
No,
Yeah.
not in the house.
Not in the house.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Although it is permethrin.
Yeah.
Permethrin, which is one of the synthetic pyrethroids. They've taken pyrethrum and synthesized it. That was that great documentary we saw the other day regarding synthesizing plant drugs that they get from plant like digitalis and that sort of thing. And in the lab, finding that particular drug that does the job in a plant and synthesizing it. That's what nicotine sulfate. I think they synthesized nicotine to make Black Leaf 40, the old product Black Leaf 40.
Yep.
They might have synthesized it rather than actually taken it from the tobacco plant. It's hard to say.
Yeah, and I guess that advanced into what's the new product? Admire. It's a nicotine-based. It's all synthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Admire, though, is not available to the general public.
Not to the public. No. But it is it's a pretty good product for sure. But just like anything, you have to be safe.
Oh yeah.
And when it says on the label, regardless what it is, you do exactly what it tells you to do on the label. And if it says, do not breathe the mist, that means you have to wear a respirator. If it says do not get on your skin, you got to wear the rubber gloves.
Yeah.
You can't have your skin exposed.
Well, I mean, I practically drank the stuff back in the day.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in the greenhouse. I would be in there
the
spraying with latex, with really stinky latex, systemic insecticide that's not on the market anymore. And I thought, I see this little pocket of spider mites. So I go in there and think, didn't put my mask on or anything.
Just do that little
and then,
spot.
there's another one. There's another pocket. And I ended up in there and Dad would come into the greenhouse. What are you doing? It's just stinking in there. Not a good thing. Not recommended, but I'm still kicking right now. Touch wood. And Dad lived to 93, but it's
that's genetics.
It is. It's all about genetics. Yeah. In fact, some people they're saying are genetically immune to COVID. Like some people just aren't going to get it, but they can carry it, but they're not going to get the symptoms because they're genetically.
Yeah, they can spread it to all their friends and neighbors, but not even feel it.
That's right.
Fabulous.
My son, I gave him a nice mixed pan of succulents, and he committed the cardinal sin that people do, he overwatered his succulents. And this one succulent, I can't remember which one it was, but anyway, it started to rot. And he said the smell from the rot filled his condo.
Nice.
Dad, he says, I said, well, just get it outside. You're in Vancouver. It should be okay. And I said, just back off on the watering. People just overwater stuff, especially succulents.
Yeah. Oh, terrible. Yeah. They, the once a month thing is even, you got to watch even once a month. It can be less than that. So, meaning, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. It's not even that. What I do is I look at the actual foliage itself, and I look for signs of it starting to shrivel and shrink. And, the plant can shrink quite a bit, and it's still okay, But when it starts to shrivel and shrink, and it starts to literally go limp, then well, I'm going to give it a little bit. But even then, you don't really soak it. You just give it a little bit here and there. And the plants, any roots that come in contact with that little bit of water that you give it, even though let's say that 80% of the root mass is still bone dry, but you water about 20% of the root mass, which is generally what happens when you water one of these plants that's super dry. Most of it goes right through and out the bottom, and it's gone. It doesn't really soak in because the soil's so dry. But the little bits that trickle down around the edges of the pots and whatnot, these little bits of water that are there, those succulents will grab those, and they'll absorb that little bit of water, but yet the general mass of that is still quite dry. So it's a beautiful thing if you can be careful that way, is to keep them quite dry and yet give them a little bit of water, but only when they're showing the symptoms. So when the leaves start to shrink and they're starting to, they're showing the symptoms, they look like they're going to go.
Yeah, in their native area, most succulents that are native to certain areas, those areas are generally quite dry. And when they do get rain, it's just not a lot of rain.
No, that's right. And that's where they become experts at just picking up tiny, tiny amounts. Yeah. With my jade plant, that's one of my secrets to keeping that thing alive, is that I just leave it, and it actually defoliates, like it drops leaves through the wintertime. And I just keep looking at the healthiest leaves, and I look at just all the leaves generally, and I look for those ones starting to shrivel. And as soon as they get limp a little bit and starting to get a little wrinkly, and I touch them and they're soft, then I do that very light watering, and I wait about a half an hour, just around the outer perimeter of the pot, and then I come back about a half an hour later and give it another little shot, and then that's it. So the plant's got to find that little bit of water I gave it, and then it's good for another month.
Well, that's good advice for succulents, and I hope my son is listening today.
Yeah.
Joe, are you listening, Joe?
Joe, are you out there?
Yeah. 250-862-2525 to get through to Ken and I. We're going to be here for another hour and a half this morning, and we invite your calls. We always enjoy hearing from people, and it really helps make the show move on. However, Ken and I can blab about plants till the cows come home, is what they say. We're going to take that short break. We're going to be back with more AM 1140 Charge. Well, the thing is, we're not getting any snow down here, but they are seemingly getting some up on the ski hills. So that means our snowpack, our reservoir of moisture up in the hills is looking fairly good. We don't know for sure yet, but
yeah.
Because that's our source of water from the hills.
Well, it's always interesting some years when we get like literally flooding conditions and we're in the middle of a drought. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Which could happen again. Last couple of years we had some rain, which was kind of nice. It was different. Having a rainy season right through until July, and then about mid-July, all of a sudden it would just switch like a light switch, and into summer we go. But still, we haven't had that really intensive summer like we had was about 3 or 4 years ago when we had the real thing, which was that 40-degree daily temperature with just sun that just scorched the earth. It was pretty intense.
Yeah, for sure. My genus of the week is Acer. Very simple genus, Acer, Acer. it is the genus that all the maples belong to.
Yeah, the maple family.
The maple family, a genus of trees and shrubs commonly known as maples. The genus is placed in the family, I can't pronounce it, Sapondaceae or something. Do you say Sapondaceae or Sapondaceae? Daceae. Sapondaceae. So sap, eh? Interesting. Sappy.
I don't know.
There are approximately 128 species of maples. I would have thought there might have been more, but that's because some...
Oh, there's thousands and thousands of cultivars
and varieties.
And varieties
but
and
species.
Subspecies. Yeah. There's a huge...
But most of which are native to Asia, with a number also appearing in Europe, Northern Africa, and North America. Only one species, Acer laurinum, extends into the southern hemisphere. The type of species of the genus is the sycamore maple, Acer pseudoplatanus, the most common maple species in Europe. The maples usually have easily recognizable palmate leaves, and Acer negundo is one of the exceptions, and distinctive winged fruits. The closest relatives of the maples are the horse chestnuts. Maple syrup is made from the sap of some maple species. So our maples, and Japanese maples, Norway maples, all sorts of different maples, and we plant a lot of maples. And the nice thing is, deer don't eat maples. They will rub their horns on them.
Yeah, and the young fawns will nibble the tips off of them because they're too dumb to know.
They're too dumb to know they don't eat maples. Excuse me, you don't eat maples.
Back away from there. No, it is. It's it's a rarity. I have witnessed it, but it's typically the really young deer trying things to see what they like and what they don't like. And unfortunately, the occasional lace leaf maple gets in the way. They have that beautiful, lush, soft foliage when they leaf out, and so the young deer can't resist it. But it's not long after they consume it that they realize that was a bad idea.
Yeah, I wonder what they do.
It's a memory thing with deer. It's a digestibility.
Maybe they get the trots or something from it.
Something like that.
We're going to go to the phone lines. We've got Wilf phoning in, talking to us. Good morning, Wilf.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Yes, I have a dahlia issue here. I've stored my dahlias for a number of years the same way, the same place, and this year I got sprouts on them, just about every one. I bought 16 varieties. And the sprouts are about, 16 inches long. Is it likely that I'm going to lose these this year?
I doubt it, Wilf. I have the same thing going on, and I have mine stored under the bench in the greenhouse, and I've got long growth on them. I think I'm just going to cut that growth in half, and just try and make them go to sleep again. I don't know. Not too much else you can do.
This is first year this has happened. I've stored same way, same place for a number of years now.
Well, my dahlias must be reading your dahlias mail.
It could be the warm winter as well. It's not as cool as it had been. The moisture content in the air, whatever.
Well, I always get a little bit of growth on mine under the bench. I mean, it's warm in the greenhouse, and I usually get a little bit of growth, but not this long extended growth that's coming out into the pathway.
Will, for yours are they actually still in containers, or have they been removed?
They are still in containers, yes.
Yeah, so just keep them dry, and I would say at some point you're going to need to trim them back. I would always leave some of that growth on, like at least about 10 inches or so.
Yes, quite likely, because otherwise that may be the only growth they have, and take it off.
But what I would do is when it's time to get them going a bit, probably around the end of February, I'd bring them out and get them into some brighter light conditions and actually start treating them like they're getting started for spring. And then I would even let them grow a bit with the long, scraggly stuff just to get the chlorophyll going and get them turning nice and green and happy, and then cut them back to that 10-inch height. And then you'll start to see some new growth pushing from the base. And later on, maybe around the end of March or so, you'd be able to just snip out the remnants of those skinny shoots and just let the new ones come on. And you'd be good to go.
I have another, not so much as a question, but my parsnips for the first time ever, have had the carrot rust fly in them. Does that usually happen with parsnips?
It can. They're relatives, and the carrot rust fly would go onto parsnips. Yes, which is unfortunate because are any still in the ground?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Well, I personally would dig them up.
I would right now because this cold snap could even damage parsnips, the tops. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I would dig them, Wilf, and by disturbing and exposing that ground, you might even have an effect of the frost killing the overwintering.
Okay, that's an idea. Yeah. That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and then you can get a chance to clean them all up and cut out the bad parts and prep them a bit and... let them dry slightly, put them into a bag, and put them in the refrigerator, and they'll be good for months.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose with the rust, there's no insect left in them. The insect have left. Is that correct?
Well, the little larva might still be in there, Wilf.
Oh, really?
The larva. But, however, they pupate, and then they emerge as a fly in the spring or in the late spring. However, hard to say, but I think I would dig them and expose some of that earth to the frost that's coming up.
Okay, that's an idea.
Okay, Wilf.
Okay,
thanks for the call.
Very much.
Appreciate it very much.
Thanks for calling.
Okay, then. Right.
You betcha.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Now, we've got Dan Bruce on the line, and I'd like to talk to Dan because he's going to introduce our good friend, which is coming on after the break. And Dan, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Don and Ken.
How are you?
I'm getting my long underwear.
Prepared.
Have you got one of those flaps on the back of your long underwear?
Mind your own business.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, that's getting awfully personal on the radio, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Could be those fancy battery-operated ones that stay nice and toasted.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you brought it up. Okay, so we've got a great mutual friend coming on talking about another great mutual friend.
Well, that is the case, and I would like to introduce Bob Kingsmill. In a lot of cases, he doesn't need introduction because he's well known in the valley and an internationally acclaimed ceramic artist. And he and Alistair Beddy were great friends, and I, with great confidence, will hand the virtual microphone to Bob, who can talk about Alistair.
Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. Now, what we have to do, though, Dan, is we're going to take that short break that we will take, and then we'll have Bob on for a number of minutes after that because he's going to take up your slot, which you're usually in. What a great thing that we've invited him on. He's quite the guy. And so was Alistair. You met Alistair soon after he came to Kelowna, did you not?
Who, me or Bob?
We're talking to you, Dan.
Oh, yes. Yes, Alistair was on El Dorado Road out in the Mission. And, his garden was most impressive. The thing I really remember about it was the clump of Agapanthus, lily of the Nile, that he had growing outdoors for many, many years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he had a little dry rockery with succulents and that too. I remember I did a little TV thing on his garden once.
Yes.
We're going to take that short break, and when we come back, you can actually introduce Bob, Dan, and then we're going to see you take off, right?
That's correct.
Okay, let's do that when we come back with more AM 1150 Garden. Okay, here we are, Dan. Introduce our good friend Bob.
Yes, well, I'm not going to take up any of Bob's valuable time. I will simply remind people that Bob is the internationally renowned potter, started out in Kelowna, now lives in Coldstream, And you can see an example of his work at the Kelowna Community Theatre, a really nice mural, ceramic mural on the wall. Anyway, without more ado, Bob, go for it.
Hey, Bob, it's great to have you on the show. We're very honored to have you here. Good morning.
Well, thank you very much, Don and Ken. To begin with, I'd like to know a little bit more about the battery-operated underwear flaps.
I know. It's quite something. Mom, I remember my grandfather didn't have a battery-operated one, but he certainly had the long underwear with the flap on it.
Gotta have.
I got quite a kick out of it when I was a kid. Yeah. So, Bob, your relationship with Alistair was very, it was interesting, it was friendly, it was loving, it was a mutual admiration society, all that stuff. But I just want to open with this. I remember visiting Alistair one time, and he was so excited. He got excited over just about anything, but he really got excited when he got a gift from you. And I just remember the caption on it. I can't remember what the actual art was, but the caption said "Betty Bye." Can you explain what that was all about?
Oh, I can't quite remember. You know, we're talking about a long time ago, and we're talking about a man who was happy, curious, kind, and generous, and he would come over to the studio, and whenever I opened a kiln, he would invariably find the best piece and take it away. Betty Bye, I think, was probably related to something like his falling asleep at dinner or something. I don't quite remember.
Well, it was hanging out at his front entrance for quite a while, but and then you gave him another gift at I think it was his 80th birthday. We celebrated at Gushikan Gardens. Could
you speak up a bit, please?
Well,
Your voice is a bit soft.
Okay, I remember celebrating. I think it was his 80th birthday at Gushikan, and you were there celebrating with us. It was very nice. But Alistair came from Manitoba, where you really, have to be an avid garden enthusiast to really have a nice garden, because it gets pretty cold there. And so when he moved here,
what? He first came to the Canadian prairies when all those Commonwealth flyers were there, learning to fly in Saskatchewan and across the prairies. I met him after he had retired. He was invited by Tommy Douglas to come back to Canada. He had left Britain. He was on the prairies. He went back to Britain. Tommy Douglas, as I remember it, went back and invited him to come and run the schools for the retarded in Moose Jaw.
Wow.
So he was quite a few years in Moose Jaw. Mm-hmm. I guess we don't say schools for retarded anymore, but no. It was a place of safety for mm-hmm. people with difficulty. Mm-hmm. And he came out, and he lived down the street from me on El Dorado Road. And he very kindly came up one day to suggest that the steer my wife and I had bought was incapable of giving us milk. We were kids, the valley was filled with young Americans. There was all kinds of stuff going on south of the border. And here was this stable, very bright Scottish guy who had a passion for gardening that was sort of an absolutely new construct for us.
Well, and you're now in Coldstream. Do you have a garden there at all?
You know what? My wife has a very serious rose problem.
Oh.
and she was just saying last night when she met Alistair, he was removing some irises. Mm-hmm. And she said, "Why are you doing that?" And he said, "Because they're the wrong color." And that introduced Marianne to the idea that color, structure, and texture in a garden were all things to be taken into consideration. So now Marianne has about 110 roses in the garden.
Isn't that something?
Of course, they come and go as the deer nip away at them. But
isn't that something?
But she has a very, very sweet garden, and Alistair's just remembered for his knowledge and his absolute passion for the garden. He introduced the idea of double digging, which I had never heard of, and I don't know if that's popular anymore, but the garden well tended by him, and as he gave to the garden, it gave back to him in pleasure. And in this time of COVID, I think that's a very significant thing, and it points to the importance of your having a garden show. It's brilliant.
Well, thank you. And Alistair did teach me a lot, and Ken as well. He taught us so much. And I never thought of Alistair as being any older than us until he got old. And then all of a sudden, Alistair, you are much older than us.
He seemed quite ageless.
He seemed ageless. His personality and that, I mean, he could have been 6 years old, he could have been 20, he could have been 40, and whatever. He was just ageless. It was a wonderful man.
Well, that's right. And it was based, I think, partly on being a Scot, partly on just being curious. And he seemed to get joy from so many things, you know. And of course, you and Ken were probably about 10 years old when you started gardening, so he would have seemed very young because of his sense of curiosity and the way he approached and loved plants.
Yes, and his laugh is what I remember as well. And you almost have to smoke a pack of cigarettes before you could laugh like him. He had that. I don't know.
That's right. He would just explode.
Yes.
He was always laughing.
I remember he was saying goodbye to a friend who was going off to Switzerland. The man was going off to Switzerland to see a woman who happened to be my ex-mother-in-law. She was very beautiful. And as his friend was getting on the plane, he turned and he said, "So you're off to Switzerland for some Edelweiss, are you?" And that gave him pleasure. But, well, he was just a very rich and good character.
Well, one other story before we let you go. Alistair came in one day with this rose bush, and the whole bottom was chewed off by a pocket gopher. And the
Marianne fights the pocket gophers here.
The way he explained it was he had a little. He was imbibing a little the night before, a little bit of scotch, and so he got up in the morning. He was a little woozy in the morning, and he got up and he looked out the back and through the kitchen window, and he literally saw this rose bush moving back and forth. And then all of a sudden it just plop, it fell over. And he caught the tail end of this pocket gopher's meal and brought it in, and he laughed. It might have been one of his prize roses, but just having that happen, he just laughed. He thought that was pretty cool.
That's probably the way he would have behaved. I was looking last night at a Robert Burns poem, and the line that caught me was, Believe me, happiness is shy, and come not I when sought. Well, Alistair had that happiness in him all the time, and he also had a shyness. Oddly, it seems contradictory, but he was just embracing his garden and the works of art he had in the house, and the friendships he had, and the willingness and ability to pass stuff on that was his experience.
Bob, we got about 30 seconds left here, and I just want to tell you how much pleasure it was to have you on with us today, because you're just an amazing man, an amazing artist, and where can people see your stuff?
Well, I still have my studio on Granville Island. You can pop down there if Bonnie Henry allows you to leave the house.
Right.
You can come up to Coldstream where we have a studio, and if you like, by all means, just come up and see Marianne's garden in the spring.
Well, I've got a project I'm working on in Coldstream, so maybe I should get your address off the air, and I will, or at some point, just give me an email or something, don@thegardenexpert.com, and we'll keep in touch.
We'll keep in touch, absolutely. And thanks again for the program,
Bob.
And for having characters like Dan Bruce around. It's really rich.
We get into trouble sometimes. But thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Bob Kingsmill, great man. We're going to take a short break now for the news and whatnot, and we got a whole hour of rip-roaring garden show coming up when we come back with more AM 1150 Garden. are back for that blitzing hour that I talked about. I got to tell you, we're getting very close to putting together this trip. As long as our safety in mind, the COVID thing is subsides. We never know, but you might as well plan ahead anyway, whether or not there's COVID, and then if it doesn't fly, it doesn't fly. But boy, this trip that we've got planned here is just incredible. It's to London and Amsterdam. And in London, we will see some special gardens like Kew Gardens, but also the Chelsea show, which I went to in 2016. Amazing show. And then after that, we get on the train and we go through the Channel and go up to Amsterdam for the Floriade flower show, which happens only once every 10 years. So it's going to be, hopefully we can get it all together and make it happen. And I think there's room for about 20 people in the group. And, so we're going to see what we can do. Hopefully it'll happen. We're all hoping that things are going to turn around as far as this darn pandemic thing goes. But
well, there's good odds, if by then hopefully, everyone will receive their their shot, and everything will be good.
Yeah, and no surprises. That's the whole thing. They're talking about a little bit of surprise, but we don't want to talk about COVID because it's gardening season coming up. We got to have one little jolt of cold first. I mean, can't get through the winter without one jolt of cold.
I was kind of hoping it would be like a -14 at night and a daytime -7 sort of thing. That would have been enough of a cold snap, but the -23.
I don't like that. I don't like the sound of that.
When the high temperatures are going to be like -13 or so, that's a little bit sketchy for sure for us gardeners. Yeah.
So both of us are going to go home after the show and spend some time looking around to see what's vulnerable, what isn't, and what needs to be. Like you say, I'm going to get that heating cable into the fig. Get that all looked after, and look after my banana a little bit more, and look after my hellebore a little bit more.
Do you put heating cables on the banana plant at all, or no? You just protected.
I just got a big tub over top of it with sawdust on top of the tub, and but there's a little bit of an exposed part of the tub there that I'm going to cover up a little bit. I've got some nice Nature's Gold mulch I'm going to put around my I have one hybrid tea rose. So it's going to be interesting to see how my standard Olympiad rose is going to do. The standard Olympiad, of course, is quite vulnerable. It's one of the top grafted ones, tree rose. We used to call them tree roses because they were grafted on top of a stem. And that baby's been there probably 15 years.
You're going to have to build a box for that. Yeah. It sounds like it's pretty durable. Like it's survived a lot.
It's survived 15 years, Ken. It's right up against the south side of the house, and I think it gets an influence there. If it was standing out all by itself in the open, I think it would have been toast in a couple of years.
Or even on the north side or partially shaded. Because in this case, that when you do get those real cold winters like that, typically, not always, but typically that comes from the north. So you get that frigid north wind.
Dry.
And so everything on the north side of the house freezes and those little frost pockets show up. But on the south side of the house, often it's protected. So, you've got it in the right spot.
Right on. Well, I know the miniature roses are going to be on their own. You're on your own. I'm sorry. Can't be running around covering you guys up, but they're pretty tough.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
And I've got a miniature rose climber called New Day.
Yeah.
Ken, speaking of miniature roses, remember Wilson's Nursery that had all the miniature roses, the heathers?
Absolutely, They were awesome.
Nice people. And there is no more Wilson's Nursery. They retired and sold the land. But I did find a catalog with all the roses in there, all the different
and all
names.
The heathers
all the names and the heathers and kalunas.
Man, they had a wild selection.
Oh, they had a great selection of stuff. And, it's unfortunate because some of those varieties, I wish I could resurrect them and do a little rooting myself. I could even maybe contact them. I think I still have their home number.
If they're still there?
If they're still there, I don't know. But anyway, it would be fun to get some. I've never rooted roses before.
What?
I haven't. No, I haven't rooted roses. I mean, in any numbers. A couple of times I have, but no, I've never done it as a living. Did you do that when you were growing?
Well, we always had a few. Yeah, the same thing. We just kind of dabbled in it, but we did so much propagation that it was easy just to throw stuff in. When we had the nursery, and I guess that would have been back in the Okanagan plant propagators years, and we were just propagating everything, anything we could get our hands on, and especially if it was something a little more interesting. And so with the roses, there were some really good ones. Yeah. That the Alberta rose, was that Rosa rubiflora? I'm not sure, but anyway, there were some really good ones that were pretty cool. So
what was your methodology there?
They were just like a typical either a softwood or a hardwood cutting. Okay. The hardwood cuttings, we do in the summertime, of course, usually around the end of July, early August, and good timing for hardwood cuttings, and then softwood stuff. You pretty much, you're not too far off, about a month earlier or so. So when the new growth comes on a plant, whether it's a shrub or a rose or whatever, the new growth is so soft and tender. The only way you can keep that alive is literally in a mist propagation situation. But you just let it grow until it just gets hardened up a little bit, and then that's still sort of that softwood cutting category. Then you can take the tip cuttings, pinch out any flowers that might be there, and still best we put them into our mist propagator. Yeah. So that was really a really nice tool.
Interesting, because with grapes, for instance, I root grapes just about every year. I'm going to root some this year again. Got a couple of varieties that I like, and got some people wanting some. So I'm going to root some grapes. What we do there is we take the dormant grape cutting and put it into some medium with some rooting hormone and whatnot, and put it on a heat pad so the bottom is nice and hot, and the top is cool. Yep. And they just come alive
especially
in the spring.
Yeah. You can take them. When I was a kid, that was one of the first things I ever propagated was grapes, and they were Concord grapes because they were one of the hardiest varieties. But we were out in the East Kootenays, in the Cranbrook, and it was in the summertime. I remember August, and my dad wanted to grow some grapes, so we had a buddy who had some Concord, so he's like, "Oh, give me some of those grapes." So he just hacked off a bunch of branches, and it was in August. And my dad just took them and chopped them into chunks and buried them in the ground, and that was it in August. And just literally walked away from them. He watered them a few times. They were under the eaves too, so they were really dry, really poor soil, kind of sandy, really bad, silty, sandy soil. And they just all rooted and grew, and they grew there for years, covered the whole side of our house. Yeah. Again, that was the southwest corner of the house.
They can be quite animated, those grapes. We're going to go to the phone lines, and I think I know who this Wendy is. Good morning, Wendy.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
I was just kind of tickled hearing the memories of Alistair Betty. When we had our nursery, when we were first starting our nursery, and like Ken was saying, we were just propagating everything in sight. Alistair would come out and visit, and I remember his laugh so well. It was just like, oh my God, it just used to crack me up. And he was so funny. He was laughing a lot because he was cracking himself up. And
all the time,
I just have such fond memories of him. And when he sold his house, he had Ken come and take some of his prized things that, apparently the person who was buying it wasn't such a gardener as he. And so he gave Ken and I a whole bunch of things that we quickly took home and propagated like crazy.
It was good timing.
That's what we were doing then. It was just made me so happy to hear about him. He was just a lovely, lovely man.
He sure was.
And just remember all those really rare species that, in a way it was great because we kept those varieties alive. Because a lot of those would perish because those were such rare, unusual species, a lot of them, especially the little succulents that he had. And we managed to keep those things alive, and just amazing. And then propagate them and sell
memories.
Them. Yeah.
Wendy,
I'll log off.
Wendy, thank you, dear, for calling you. I always like to hear from you. But one quickie before we take the break here. Alistair moved to Kelowna from the prairies, and he wrote a letter, first of all, to us, because we were the only. He had a $500 or $1,000 gift certificate through FTD.
Oh,
yeah, and of course that's how I got in touch with him, because he searched around in Kelowna for an FTD florist that also had a nursery, and we were the only ones.
Perfect.
That had an FTD florist and a nursery. So he wrote a letter, and he had this long list. I just wish I would have kept that list, because it was a list of stuff. I had to go to the plant dictionaries for some of them.
Yes.
And he was like penstemon. I'd never heard of a penstemon before. This is back in I think it was probably the early 80s.
And there's only about 1,000 varieties of penstemon. How are you to know about it?
Yeah, I know. It was really quite something.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's how we met, and we did help him out with a whack of stuff. Of course, he went to a lot of specialty nurseries around BC for a lot of his stuff too. But that he was a heck of a guy. But the thing is, and something none of us have mentioned about Alistair, was his collection of Chinese pottery, like the teacups, the eggshell teacups that he had, and the Ming vase that he owned. I'd never met anybody who owned an actual authentic Ming vase. And paintings, his paintings. Some of his original paintings that he had on the wall were just incredible. I don't think he had a Rembrandt or anything, but close, that sort of thing.
Not like Dan Bruce.
Yeah, exactly. Dan Bruce. Wendy, thank you, dear. We appreciate the call.
Okay, guys. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Thanks for calling.
On that note, we're going to have to take that short break. It's time for a break, and we invite your calls, 250-862-2525 to get through to us today. And we'll be back with more AM 1150. Well, we've been talking about Alistair Betty, one of our favorite Scotsman gardeners. He was a clever man, and Ken and Wendy had a lot to do with their with his plants after he sold his home on El Dorado and had to move some of his plants to his home. But he lived in Sunrise Village. In Sunrise Village, the properties are quite a bit smaller than what he had out in El Dorado, so he didn't have room for everything. So you took quite a bit of your stuff to your nursery.
He as Wendy was saying, is that we had to go and collect up stuff, and he would go and he helped us name everything, and he made sure we got all the good stuff and leave the stuff that didn't matter so much, I guess. But we took the majority of the plants, and we took them all to our nursery, and we set them all up in a special section. And then Alistair would come by and visit the plants once in a while, and he said, I really want to take this one and that one and this one and that one. These are the ones I want. And then we linked them up with my cousin Pat, and through Dan Bruce and ourselves, and Pat was willing to go out there and give him a hand. And Pat actually helped him landscape his house. So he came over and picked up all the plants that Alistair wanted and brought him out there and helped him landscape his new place, which is out in Sunrise Village there. And the one hosta he wanted, which was a Ceboldiana elegans, which is one of the bigger hosta varieties, and that was just one of his favorite plants. So he wanted it in this real prominent location right in the corner, and so Pat went ahead and planted it all in there. Everything was good. And the next year, it seemed like it was in June or something, and Alistair came out for a visit, and we said, "Oh, Alistair, how are all those plants doing?" And he said, "Oh, they're really doing good, but I have to tell you, I don't know what Pat did to that hosta, but it's gone crazy." I said, "What do you mean crazy?" He says, "Yeah, it's like 5 feet high and about 7 feet across, and the leaves are massive, like 18 inches in diameter." And of course, he was giggling and laughing, and it was really an amazing thing to see that plant just take off. It was like, okay, I'm home again, and poof, away it went. Yeah. And it was one of his favorite things was that hosta, and my goodness, did it grow. I've never seen one that big ever.
And he asked Pat, he said, "What did you do to make that hosta?"
Yeah, what did you bury under that hosta?
Yeah, that's something. One of the things that I remember of his garden on El Dorado was maybe a year after he moved there. He went over to Bylands, and they had brought 1 year. It was only 1 year. I talked to Maria about this, and she said it was just the 1 year they brought these in from Holland, these top-grafted sorbus, European mountain ash.
Right.
Top-grafted weeping mountain ash.
Nice.
It was fabulous. And I don't know if that darn thing survived or lived there, or still is there on that El Dorado property, but it was it had a trunk on it when he planted it about 3-4 inches in diameter. Mm-hmm. And it was top grafted, and so it just looked like an umbrella, but it was gorgeous when it was had its berries on, you know.
Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty unusual plant.
Very unusual.
Don't see that
Nope.
very often.
It was only one time that they brought them in, and I think they only brought 10 in. So I don't know if there's any survived around the valley or not, but it was just the 1 year, Maria said, that they brought these in from Holland. So,
wow.
Well, there you go.
Well, that was typical of Alistair. He always had the weirdest, most unusual, rarest plants, and he coveted them. He just loved them.
When he moved to Kelowna, he had retired, and I think he was 65 when he moved to Kelowna. And as I said, I never thought him as being up there in years until all of a sudden he did get up there in years and subsequently got ill and passed away. And it was it blew my mind. Alistair, you can't be gone. You know, he can't be. He was an amazing guy. So when he moved to Kelowna in the 80s, he was in the 80s, I'm sure it was in the 80s, early 80s. Mm-hmm. He was 65, so when he passed away, I think he was 90-something, in his 90s. So we knew him for about 30 years. He made quite an impact in Kelowna in 30
sure
years.
Did, yeah.
You betcha. Well, 250-862-2525. If you want to join us today, our lines are open for conversations on gardening and any questions about the upcoming weather. You might have some questions worrying about certain plants out in the nursery or out in the garden, some of which, no problem. They'll take this hands down.
Yeah, some will.
Yeah, and then others that are a little more vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And certain things that are vulnerable because we've had this mild weather. And things are starting to push.
Yeah.
My Hellebor has got big buds on it, and now I haven't looked at any fruit trees, but like you say, the peaches and nectarines and not so much. Some of the plums are pretty hardy, but apricots in particular, because they're fruiting buds over winter, just like a forsythia. They're early to blossom. And if they start to push, and they're vulnerable to problems. Now, not a lot a person can do with a fruit tree.
No,
stand there, blow on it, or something.
a magnolia for that matter.
Yeah,
and magnolias are like that.
They could get hurt.
And some of my webinars I've been doing, I'm using the magnolias as an example of how sort of the structure of trees and the bud scales that protect the buds, on the ends, and that fuzzy, if you think about the magnolia buds as like a little fuzzy winter warm jacket, it's not really warm, but it's certainly preventing the desiccation of those buds that are under there. Yep. Those beautiful flower buds ready to go, but unbelievable. I think we're going to see hopefully a decent bloom this spring, but wow, you never know with this cold snap.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be interested to see how my Magnolia grandiflora comes through.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, we've got Pam on the line. We've got a couple of minutes here for Pam. Good morning, Pam.
Hey, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I was hoping we might duck out of winter without a deep snap, but I guess just hunker down and find your woolies and stay indoors for a couple days.
I think so. But our plants are vulnerable, some of the plants. But I just want to, I know last week I mentioned you want to say something about hands and service and what the beautiful things you do, and certainly how it ties into gardening.
Sure. I love opportunity. We Hands and Service is a local not-for-profit agency that has been around for about 20 years now. We've kept a relatively low profile because most of what we do is confidential service in our clients' homes, and so it's difficult to share about it because of the sensitive nature of it. And we certainly have had our ups and downs through this last year pandemic of having restrictions not allow us to do our thing, and now things are opening up a little bit, so that's getting better. But one thing that has never been in question is our Living Salad project. because even in the midst of the height of the pandemic last May, we were able to fulfill our project obligations. And this year we're planning on ramping up for even better and bigger, which probably makes it better because it impacts more people positively. And for those who don't know, Living Salads, the portable community garden, is a project that we dreamt up about 9 years ago to bring community gardens to people who were shut in and weren't able to get to community gardens. And perhaps their living spaces didn't allow for any actual soil like yard. They might live in condos or small suites. And we've grown the project from 35 planters to this year's goal of 500 planters. And that represents 500 households. 350 of those households are inhabited by children of School District 23, whose families have food security challenges. And through the schools, so we can keep confidentiality respectful, we're able to offer these children an opportunity to learn how to garden in a container planting to produce some plants that will feed them for the growing season. And maybe, this is our little tongue-in-cheek joke, maybe plant a seed to produce lifelong gardening habits in them as they grow up. So that's really kind of my focus today, I guess, is just the excitement I'm having, thinking about 350 households receiving planter gardens. Many of these households have individuals, even the adults, who don't have familiarity with planting. And so we're pretty jacked about that. We're pretty excited.
That's and awesome. Quickly before we let you go, there's an event. There's something coming up on handsandservice.ca. Light It Up. That was a fundraising event that we had that ended at the end of last year, December 31st. Okay.
It was a fundraiser that we had that was super successful, and all the funds are going toward our Living Salad project. That's why I can talk with expectation about the project, because we have the funds and we know wonderful. This is happening. We know that no matter what no matter what, we can never say never because you never know these days. But right. At this point, the way that our community response to our pandemic is going, because Living Salads is an outdoor project, and because we're holding it at Helen's Acres this year, we have the luxury of space. So distancing will not be an issue. We will be able to distance people as is appropriate for the time frame that we will find ourselves in May. And we are beginning to confirm all of the many plants that we need, because there's 6 plants per planter, so that's 30,000 plants that we're dealing with, which is wonderful. Pretty great.
And just before I let you go, you've teamed up with Helen's Acres and Okanagan Fruit Tree Project, which people can look up on the internet and see what's going on there. They're 2 great outfits. And Pam, I appreciate your calling in. We always like to hear from you, and you do great work. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for your passion for the soil and for encouraging people to get their hands in the dirt. Grow something beautiful.
Thank you, dear. Awesome. Take care.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
That's fabulous. What a great project.
I know. And so what we're going to do now, though, is take a short break and invite your calls, 250-862-2525 to get through to us. And we'll be back with more. We are back with you, and it is a little cloudy out there, a little low-hanging clouds, but still not too bad. It's going to get a little cool in the next little bit here. But Sandy is just giving us a message here, wondering if we could discuss on air any explanation we might have for why her 10-foot corn plant leaves are sticky right now. Ken?
Oh, yes. Well,
sticky leaves.
I have a couple ideas there. With corn plants, that's actually a Dracaena fragrans, I believe, and that's a beautiful wide-leafed Dracaena. It's one of my favorites. One of the first houseplants I ever had. What a cool plant. Fairly subject to scale insects, and so scale insect is something that you'll find on those leaves. Very difficult to see, but because it is a corn plant, they've got nice wide leaves, so they're easy to wipe and clean. So what I would suggest you do is just take a damp cloth and, just moisten it nicely, and then just start you can start at the bottom, probably the bottom of the plant, and you just start wiping and cleaning and inspecting the leaf from on the undersides first. And so you sort of go all the way up from the bottom all the way to the top and wiping the bottoms of those leaves. And as you go over them, you're looking for these little brown, sort of scaly-looking things that don't move. They're just sitting there. And so you'd go along. If you do see any of those, you can just scrape them off with your fingernail. And those are the mamas where all the little babies are coming from. Mm-hmm. So it's one of these things where you'll do that inspection, you do the wiping all the way up to the top of the plant. And as you get to the softer leaves on the top, you have to be more gentle and more careful. But again, focusing on the undersides of the leaves. Then once you hit the top, switch over to the tops of the leaves and do the exact same thing all the way down. And look in the little cracks and crevices for these little hard-shelled scale insects. And as you learn to identify them, you'll learn to look for them, and you'll have to pick them off with your fingernails. They come right off real easily. You're also going to double-check and make sure that you don't have any mealybugs, which is kind of a white, fluffy-looking little guy, and they team up into these little groups where they produce a fair bit of white powder. And so what you do there is just same thing is you pick at them, you try to remove them, and then you clean it with that white wet cloth. And so as you go through the whole plant top to bottom and you leave it, then you walk away and leave it for a week. You come back a week later and do the same thing again. And now you're going to see some of these things coming back. Some of the ones you missed are now maturing a bit and getting easier to see. Plus, as you're wiping, you're getting rid of some of the little microscopic crawlers that are on there. So it's just this cleaning process. And you're also removing that sugary substance, which is the stickiness. You wipe that off, and then you see if that reoccurs. And if it's reoccurring, then you know, well, you haven't got them all. There's still some left, and just keep it up. You have to keep that up for a fair bit of time, but once a week for a few weeks, and generally you get it.
Hopefully that's helpful to you. We have Adam joining us. Good morning, Adam.
Morning, guys. How you doing?
Excellent,
Good,
thanks.
Yeah.
Excellent. Looking to protect some of the larger plants that you guys mentioned, hydrangeas, Korean lilacs, hybrid tea roses, and things like that. Are the buds going to be susceptible to stuff here with this -20s? Or
I think on the macrophyllum, the hydrangeas, the blues and the pinks that you have, the big flowered ones, big leafed ones they're called, would be very vulnerable to this weather coming up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what I would do is I would use a cardboard box, and I think probably the best thing is you wait for it just to get a bit of cold, so let's say wait till tomorrow, and the temperatures will drop considerably and things will dry out. Then you take if you can get a large cardboard box, open the bottom part, put it over top of your hydrangea, so it's got to be a fairly big box depending on the size, and these are just the hydrangea macrophylla varieties. Most of the other ones should be okay. But these are the big, like pink and blue pom-pom type or varieties. So you drop that box over it, and you open up the bottom of the box now, which is now the top, and you can fill it with material like loose materials like leaves, that sort of thing, or a little bit of insulation or styrofoam beads or whatever you have that's available. And then close that box up and tape it back closed. And now you've got a nicely protected little sealed container that's only got to last for about a week and a half. And then we make it through the cold spell.
Yeah, and then you can take it off. But those are bloom buds that are vulnerable there. The plant itself is pretty hardy. It probably won't kill the plant, but it hurts the blooms.
With the other plants you mentioned, like the lilacs, I wouldn't worry about them. There's not much you really need to do They're tough. Do. Yeah. And what were the other plants?
One was a hybrid tea rose. It's kind of got some little buds and things like that on it.
Well, on that, Adam, you're going to have to cover that with some mulch, and if you don't have any mulch, you can actually take garden soil and cover the crown with that. A good 10, 12 inches or 15 inches of soil covering that crown, and you're going to find that with the hybrid tea roses, you're going to lose some wood, but as long as you cover the crown and preserve that, you'll be okay. They'll regrow.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the call.
Thanks for calling.
Yep. Bye-bye now.
Question,
And we have Roy joining us. Good morning, Roy.
You guys?
Good morning.
You gave me a lesson last year. I moved a white lilac in the fall. Sort of transplanted it. And of course, it didn't do anything. And so I replanted it in another location. And I'm wondering now that spring is around the corner, should I be looking for some growth on it, or will it be done?
Well, remember that when you scratch the bark of a tree, that's how you can tell that it's alive or not. Because when you scrape it, so you scratch it with your thumbnail, and then you'll see that underneath the bark is nice and green. And at this time of year, it can be quite dry. As you get into spring, though, it should start to fill up nice, and it should be really nice and moist. So when you scratch underneath it, you might see it green, you might see it pure white, nice and moist, and sort of healthy looking. So some of the branches may die back because it's been moved, or maybe some of the roots have been damaged too much. So it's taking a while to recover. But you need to always get some green leaves coming on the plant, and if it just comes from the bottom, that's okay. You can just cut the top off and just let it shoot up, and it should be happy. So, but did you get leaves on it this year at all, or
no? No, that was last year. I did that, and so I moved it to another location where it's been watered and looked after all summer.
Okay,
and now I'm just getting hopeful.
Yeah. Oh, I would just keep an eye on it. We have to get to about the end of March, and then by the end of March, you're going to know what's going on. Because by then, for sure, the buds will swell, and you can go out and you'll see some branches may die, so you can snip those out and just keep the healthy ones.
Yeah, the old plant that I have there in bud now.
They're budding already, yeah? Yeah, well, the buds will swell. They've got these bud scales that will protect those end buds, so they just keep swelling and swelling. And if they pop too early, well, then, this cold we're going to get this upcoming week will probably just kill off those buds. But the plant itself will continue to leaf out and grow normally, and hopefully you'll get a perfect lilac bloom the following year.
There you go.
Yeah, I hope.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot then.
Thanks, Roy. Appreciate the call.
Yeah, thanks.
All righty.
You betcha.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Now, we're going to take Joe quickly here, and then we got to take the break, and then we got Addie coming on. But, Joe, good morning.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
100%.
Thanks, yeah.
Always grateful for your show. I just wanted to let Ken know that I went on his website and it came up very easily.
Oh, good. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
So, yeah, it's very nice. I watched a few of the shows and I really appreciate that. So I'll watch it more, and I wanted to let you know.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
That's good, and I encourage everyone to do the same. Yeah. Joe, thank you for the call. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
We're going to take that short break because we've got Addie waiting on hold here. We are anxious to talk to her. We always love to have Addie phone in. And on that note, we'll be back with more AM 1150 Garden Show. You betcha we're back, and we've got our friend Addie. Addie, you've been with us for so long. You're part. You probably own part of the show.
I did. You know what? I didn't buy stocks or shares. I guess I should have.
You should have bought shares.
First of all, I want to give a shout out to Wendy for letting everybody know about Ken's YouTube. It's absolutely fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous to watch. And I'll tell you, behind every successful man is a stronger woman.
Yeah, that's right. She
pass
is
that
awesome.
on in case she's not listening.
Oh, she's listening.
My one question is, I'm wanting to split up my rabbit's paw.
Oh.
Now, I have got it in a container.
It's going to hurt him. Oh, no, the plant. Sorry.
But he's starting to get a little, just a little scraggly looking.
Yeah.
So I think it's time for him to have babies.
Is that
I've got him in a container where I've got some of the branches going through different holes, almost like a bird cage container. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm just going to have to yank it out and break some of those that are some of those big paws.
Yeah, it'll regrow, Addie. Yep.
When I go to plant them, because some of those rabbit paws are very long, like a foot long, not longer.
My God.
Nice.
Yeah, they're huge. So I should just cut them off to where they're going to be able to go into a pot?
Yeah, you could cut them off, put the parent plant into a new pot or whatever. But I think those things would grow, wouldn't they, Ken?
Yeah, I think I'd be looking at just carefully dividing the plant rather than utilizing. The way it's growing right now is just perfect, and so those those air roots that are hanging out over the surface, they will actually root and grow. But
will they?
Yeah, some of them you'll notice maybe on some of them where the tip starts to turn up and then it starts to grow a few little leaves.
Yeah.
As soon as you see
that's
that,
where they're growing from.
Yeah, so those will all individually grow. But you know what I would do is I'd try to always keep it attached to the mother plant, if at all possible, or the mother roots. So the first thing I would do if I wanted to multiply it is I just look at dividing the plant maybe into 2 or 3 pieces and replanting them into new pots, or taking the mother plant, keeping it going, and then putting little 4-inch pots around that plant and setting those little rooted little guys, that are attached to those little rabbit paws, and set them on top of the soil all the way around the plant to allow them time to root into those pots, and while they're still connected to the mama plant.
Good plan.
Oh, really? Okay. So one of those paws, or I would just take it where it's got a new shoot coming out of it, or not?
Yeah, so just sort of below where the new shoot comes out, is you can just set it onto the surface of the soil, and you can bury it a little bit if you like. But they'll just naturally start to root and grow and do their thing, because that's how they spread in nature. Is those little shoots will grow out and root in, and then the plant proliferates and continues to get bigger in diameter. So once it roots into its own little pot, and you just lift it carefully and see the little roots, then you can just snip that umbilical cord, and you're good to go. You've got new plants.
Wow, it's that easy, eh? Because they've been in this pot probably for the past 12 years. I had a client of mine give it to me, and hers was massive. Hers was absolutely massive, but that's probably what she's been doing, is planting the little guys in around the mother.
Yep, and so it's called layering.
It's called wearing?
Layering, Laying. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess what I should do is take one of the when I split it up, take one of the split parts, put it into a large pot, and then put the little guys around it.
Sure, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so is there a better soil? Like, I never know what kind of soil. It's potting soil, but some of the potting soil just doesn't look good enough. So can I mix something in with that potting soil to make it richer?
Well, it's not so much a richness. It's just it's the aeration. Some of these plants, some of the soils are actually almost too wet, and they don't breathe enough. So what we usually add to those things are additional ingredients, like potentially, do you know the coconut core product? So core,
no, I've never. No.
Yeah, when you go to garden centers, they'll sell these little packages, and it'll say coconut fiber, or coconut core, COIR, and that's it's a product. You take it out. It's often sold in a cube, and you kind of moisten it and you break it down, and you can mix that with your potting soils, and it really, really adds a really nice addition to your potting mix. And then depending on your type of plant that you're planting. Let's say if you were doing your orchids, for example, then you might take a little bit of the core with the bark and mix that together and get yourself this nice barky mixture. And if you're doing succulents, then you mix that mix with the bark and the core about 50-50 with your regular potting soil. And that makes nice.
Is that what in my orchid plant now? Because it's all kind of loose, kind of almost barky material. So is that what's in there now?
Yeah, it's mostly bark, yeah. Because those roots, they don't like to be in like soggy, wet conditions. They like to be sort of dangling in a humid atmosphere.
Okay, so do I give it fertilizer then after I transplant it, or just leave it?
I would just leave it until we get into closer to middle of April or so. Because that plant, they don't really need much to get going. They're not a heavy feeding plant, so.
Oh, great. Super. Thank you very much. I can hardly wait to get started on this project as soon as I get the coconut core.
Yeah, sounds fun and really interesting. So if you do, if you get a bunch of those little guys going, maybe put my name on one and I'll trade you for something.
Oh, of course. Not a problem.
That would
definitely.
Be awesome. Okay, Addie. Well, thank you
so
much.
Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, you have a good weekend.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And you know what? We're getting down to the short strokes here, Ken, and close to the end of the show. I want to just remind people we got some cold weather coming up, and that we want to make sure things are covered. Of course, that's all going to be covered in the tips and plants of the week. But, this weather is the talk of the town right now. And but I think I'm hoping that they're presenting to us the worst case scenario, and that it's going to be backed off a little bit as we go through it.
I sure hope so. It can go the other way, though.
Oh,
too,
it could get worse. Yeah.
Could be even colder.
Yeah, that's
my
right.
goodness.
So make sure your heating bills, your gas bills paid for, and
Well, and even for people like even myself, I have to take my own advice. But I have windows that are very, very. Let's say that you get that nice cool draft off of them, so I have my plants right up close to it. But in -20, that'll be like literally freezing air. Which tropical plants, they can't stand freezing air, so you got to get stuff almost just back them away from the window just for about a week or so until this cold snap goes, and then we can move them right up close again, and we're good to go.
Yeah. And we got to. I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on my greenhouse and monitoring through the nights. So there you go. Now we got the tips and plants of the week, and we're out of here. My tip of the week is if you have any garlic showing some growth, like I have, you best cover it up because it can get burnt. Dominic Ramponi mentioned that to us a couple of weeks ago. And my plant of the week is elfin thyme, one of my favorite little ground covers in between stepping stone, and it just works so well. Elfin thyme.
Very nice. I also have a tip and a plant, and my tip of the week is that the cold weather starts tonight. It's going to drop down to about -5, -7, depending where you are, and it's just a little bit of a warning of what's coming. So let's be prepared. Get out there and protect some plants, especially the hellebors or things that are early blooming, because they're going to want to get going early, and do your best to give them a little bit of protection, whatever way you can. And just a reminder that roots do breathe oxygen, so anytime you're dealing with plants, just remember that keeping them soggy wet all the time, like we were talking about succulents, can't be wet all the time. They need those roots to dry between waterings so that the roots can breathe their oxygen. Plant of the week was the hellebors, super good varieties. Watch my new video that's coming out here soon, which will have some of the hellebors highlighted. The North Star series is a new series, and they're spectacular. Good one to check out. All right, that's my tips and plants. Remember to check growercoach.com.
And the Shigo quote of the week, before Robert Hartwig, people believed that decay caused fungi. Hartwig showed that fungi caused decay. The simple reversal of words set the stage for the science of forest pathology.
Fabulous.
Take that and digest it. We're going to see you next week with more AM 1150 Garden Show.